I'm Jerrid Anderson. This is my partner, Dylan Simon. Today we'll be talking a little bit about our experience in brokerage, what we've seen in the market over the last few years, and some predictions for the future. So kicking it off, Dylan, we met, just under 10 years ago. Why did you want to build a commercial brokerage real estate team?
10 years ago is a way different market. I think Seattle is hitting the map as one of these cities that people from around the nation were just really interested in real estate in this market. And I think as we were coming out of the Great Recession, everyone was sort of reeling from what happened in 08 and 09, and the market was starting to come back. By 11 or 12, it was starting to pick up, and that's when I got in the industry in 2012. And I just saw an opportunity to sell commercial real estate a little bit differently than I'd seen other groups do. And to do that, we really needed some people. I think this is a different approach than just purely having a couple of relationships of people that you know in the market and maybe have a broader reach to the nation, because that's where the interest was being generated from for Seattle specifically, was people from around the nation wondering why Seattle was so hot. And I thought having a team of people would help with that initial reach and also just be more fun.
Yeah. We get into the office here pretty early most days. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What gets you excited about brokerage?
I think what's most exciting is just whatever project we're working on at the time, really digging into it and understanding what it's all about. And I think you and I have sold properties as far as Everett down to Tacoma. We do a lot in Seattle specifically.
Don't forget Vancouver.
And we've done some deals in Vancouver. I think with each one, we just learned something new. Sometimes it's something about the ownership group, something that's about the asset. I'd say also sometimes we'll find one that people just love that we weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's interesting about each day coming to the office. You just don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps me coming back, is just, it's different each day. Each property is different. I'll say we've worked on some memorable listings. Has there been one that you can think of that there is just, people just responded to differently than any other property?
It's a good question. We had sold a property. I remember where I was when we won the listing. I was driving south on I-5 with my family for the 4th of July. So it was almost exactly 6 years ago. It was called the Atwood.
Oh, yeah.
And it was located across the street from the Pike Place Market. Had some retail in it. It wasn't operating really well. Had been brought to market before and had not transacted. So I thought it was an interesting opportunity I was excited about, but I had no idea just how Seattle it was and how much excitement it would generate. So when we came out, I think the prior, offering or guidance was somewhere in the $12 million range, and they never got the sale completed. And we had offer upon offer between 14 to 16 million. And that was just really exciting to really outperform. And it was really based on such a great city, such a great location.
I remember before we got offers on that one, what was surprising is the amount of interest. I'd say, most of our listings were getting 75, maybe 100 groups that are interested.
Yeah.
And I remember counting the confidentiality agreements, and I think we hit something like 180 agreements.
Yeah.
And it really exemplified as sort of the cross-section of old brick, quintessential, Pike's Place market, potential for a high-rise. It was originally a hotel, so we had hotel groups, we had short-term stay groups, we had apartment groups, and it was just like fervor. We had so many people, and then we had to figure out who was real.
Yeah.
Who was a real buyer with it.
Speaking of that, we're in a different market than we've ever been. It feels like each month is just a fresh set of learning. I'm grateful to be as busy as we are as a team, that we get a lot of insight, but keeping up with who's real. How do you identify a real buyer, a real offer today?
It's a good question, because I'll say there's groups that were quote unquote real. We'd expect to get an offer from them before, and we'd negotiate with them. They'd get through the contract, they'd close it, and there was without a hiccup. Some of those groups right now aren't even in the market. They're not even offering. There's people we've never heard of showing up, making offers. And I think the real key is understanding what their thesis is on the future. And so many groups are fearful what the future looks like. And I think there's a common thread with groups that we're talking to in the market right now that believe in the long term of the city. They believe in long-term Seattle. They believe in the fundamentals. Maybe it's something they've been in other cities and they've experienced some growth there that they're seeing here. Maybe they're just born and raised here and they believe in the future. So I think their long-term thesis, like how they're approaching the market, and the number, I'd say the number one above that is where their money's coming from.
Yeah.
Is just really understanding, is it their money? Is it an outside investor that they think is interested? Then when it comes down to that final day, it doesn't show up. So it's really understanding where their money comes from. But I think between that conviction in the future and having a capital source that shares that conviction, that's kind of the lightning in the bottle right now. And there's a lot of bottles, but not much lightning in the marketplace because things have slowed down. I think that's when it's hit. And I think we've closed around 16 or 17 deals this year. And I'd say last year at this point, we were around 25. So we're probably off by 25 or 30% from where we were last year. And I think the biggest difference is just people have lost conviction.
Yeah.
And interest rates are different.
Yeah.
But I think the conviction is why people invest.
Yeah. I've noticed that on transactions I'm working. One today, we're looking at offers. We have multiple offers. I don't know if the highest offer really is the best one to that word conviction. Who really believes in it? You know, some people just show up. What's the price I need to pay? They write that, 90 days go by, something happens in the market, deal falls apart. It's that
their lender out, they're out, their equity is out.
But if they have that conviction, I can really strongly recommend them because they're speaking the same language. They love the location, they love the long-term fundamentals in Seattle if you're selling in Seattle, or they have got some thesis on the suburbs of why those are going to continue to grow as well.
Well, we put a transaction together I remember it was the last day of January. We were at a convention for apartments in Las Vegas. We identified the buyer. We got them to write an offer. I think we got the offer in hand February 1st. And we had told our client this group's convicted. And then by the time we got to a release of feasibility, the lender for that borrower had nearly failed. Their bank had failed. But the buyer had conviction. So they said, look, I'll ride out with his lender. And if that lender works, great, but give me some more time because if my lender can't come through, I will find another lender because I want to own this building.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to hear from you because I think one of our big pivots since we started this brokerage 10 years ago is really before we were all over Western Washington, Puget Sound, you've really narrowed your focus in our business of Seattle. And that was a Seattle transaction. And I think being Western Washington, some other brokers and myself included, we've been able to pivot and go out to the suburbs, go to the east side, go to some of the markets in the suburbs that people felt more comfortable during COVID. And you've just persisted doing transactions thick and thin into Seattle. What's been your biggest challenge in creating buyer pools for a market that really has had a tougher road to recover in the last couple of years?
You know, it's been hard. I think it all started politically where Seattle was this like bright rising star, 2017, all the way up, even until 18, 19. But the city council started to make some waves with development and permitting and regulations that people are starting to maybe pump the brakes a little bit. It's pretty shocking the impact that the pandemic, and if you recall the Chop Chaz area in Capitol Hill.
I drove through an actual dumpster fire through Pike Pine Corridor at 5:30 in the morning coming to work. A dumpster on fire, unattended on Pike and 12th.
Yeah.
And I marked to myself, this is the bottom.
Yeah.
I've officially hit the bottom.
So getting through that, I think a lot of people lost conviction for the direction of the city. And I just saw it as a pendulum, as many of my clients and even competitors are like, hey, we're all in on Bellevue. I'm like, that's fine. And Bellevue is a great market and very saleable. And I've done transactions there. But there's not a lot of apartment buildings kind of in that mid-market space where I spend time. And there's not a lot of transactions. There's nothing that interesting. I'm going to stick with Seattle because I think it's like a pendulum. I think we're swinging all the way this way, and we hit about as far as we could probably that year, maybe 2021.
Yeah.
And things are starting to just peel back. You know, we're seeing people go back to work. I've sat in traffic for the first time in 3 years recently. Not very fun, but kind of makes me feel like we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Seeing these offices open, seeing the weather improve, seeing the graffiti get removed, seeing the city council improve, Mayor Bruce Harrell. There's a lot of things that are providing momentum for Seattle and bringing us back. So that's what got me excited to stay here and not get distracted and go wherever the buyers wanted to go. I want to stick with Seattle. So back to your original question, how do I continue to generate interest? Frankly, I think it's been continuing to focus there, tell the stories, produce the market research, and really understand the fundamentals that, hey, yeah, Seattle's a different type of city, but there's no Seattle versus Bellevue. I think they work together. I think predominantly people want to live in Seattle that live in apartments. They'll work in Bellevue.
Yeah.
Bellevue's expensive.
Yeah.
It's hard.
More expensive.
I know you live there.
Yeah.
So Bellevue can be a little bit boring, right? If you're in your early 20s, mid 30s, where most of the apartment demographic is, I think Seattle is the more interesting and fun place to be. So that's what's kept me interested in it, telling those stories. And it really hasn't been difficult finding buyers. It's been connecting the buyers with the seller's expectations.
Yeah.
There's this incredible ramp up. Yep. And then it flattened and is cooled off. But you're operating well enough, you're going to be able to get a great price here in Seattle.
And I think one of the shifts I've seen is I felt like during COVID and even the months after that, as Seattle's trying to recover, we're telling a lot of those stories. We're talking about what's happening on the streets. We're talking about the mayor cleaning up the streets of Seattle. I'm feeling now in the last, even just 60 or 90 days, I'm hearing from clients, they're telling those stories back to me.
Yeah, that's
they're
good.
like, they're feeling excited. They took their family downtown during the summertime and took them down to Pike's Place Market.
Yep.
I know that my wife and I still come down on the weekends and we'll do a date night in Seattle and wake up. And I'd say 6 months ago, we'd wake up and there's a lot of homeless people on the street. It didn't feel like Seattle used to. In the last 60 days, it's changing. Yeah. And I think another great thing for our market, which is, coming from the Bay Area and seeing the growth they had down there in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, sort of predicting that coming up the coast up here. I think we were taking some talent from California in 2012 through 2020, the last run up.
Yeah.
I think now we're one of the better markets on the West Coast. I think before we were really competing head to head and probably losing to San Francisco and also seeing some people go to Portland. I think now we're one of the brightest stars on the West Coast. And I think we do have Bellevue to complement Seattle, but I think the real core of the employer demographic, the renter demographic is still in Seattle.
Today I received an email blast that they predict more maturities on loans this year and next year for apartment properties than the last decade combined.
Yep.
How do you think that's going to affect what's going on in the market right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the apartment market is the most stable commercial real estate segment out there, which isn't hard to predict given what's happening in office. But I think fundamentally what it means is there's a lot of money. And I think what that's going to do is I think there's going to be a lot of people that are comfortable putting money in apartments. So I think we're going to see two different trends. I think for the best of the best real estate, we're gonna see transactions at pricing that's probably not too surprising because I think there's gonna be money to come in that creates a floor because it's just intrinsically good real estate, and that's gonna be the quality of the real estate and the quality of the location.
Yeah.
And I think on the other side of it, we're gonna see a little bit of blood in the water. And I think for less quality properties, poorer operations, how the properties are operating, and less quality locations, I think we're going to see a couple of distressed deals. I say that because we haven't seen a lot of distress in the apartment market, but I think the next 24 months we're going to see some distress. I'm guessing probably Q4, Q1 next year, but I think it's going to be quick and we're going to get through it. And it's really going to be a blink like these things usually are. So that takes us through the next year or two. As far as your conviction in the market, what are you most excited about? What are you predicting? Where are we in 3 or 4 years? How does that relate to running up from the great financial crisis? Let's say 2026, Puget Sound outlook. What do you think is happening in this market?
Oh, it's a great question. I know we're talking Puget Sound. I know I'm all Seattle, so I'll answer it from the Seattle aspect. But like I mentioned with the pendulum, I think we're probably like here. My guess, if we could just get to middle again as a market, we're going to see some incredible things. As far as apartment investors go, I think that the constriction on the development pipeline caused by costs and city regulations, you name it, is going to cause rents to go through the roof.
Yep.
I think that the people that bought right now and over the next 24 months are going to see major appreciation. And I think that these massive moves back to work are going to continue. I don't believe in the work from home thing as a long-term thesis for running businesses. And we've got some of the biggest in the whole entire world headquartered in our region.
Yeah.
I think those all, humming together along with some sunshine. Seattle in 2026 is going to look like a lot like it did in 2017. And I think it's going to be a darling market for investors looking for great real estate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think people are going to be really shocked how many employers choose to be in this region because of the amenities in the region, because of the workforce that's in the region. And I think this is where we sort of benefit from being a little bit more boutique. I think San Francisco it's a tough ship to turn. It's a big one. I think Portland's almost too small to create that momentum. I think we're in that sweet spot to grow to the next tier. So totally agree. I think that's going to happen in Seattle. I think we're going to see some action like that in Bellevue. And I think the whole region is going to grow because of that.
Well, thanks for joining us. As you can tell, we're bullish on the region. We've heard about some blood in the water. Follow us on social media. Reach out to us if you want to talk more about apartments in the Puget Sound.